each other. Very, very excited to show you a lot of the work that we've done here with eHMP up to this point, and to really get into activity management and how we believe that, if implemented appropriately, can really lead us to cross a new threshold in terms of care delivery across the VA. And with you folks in OSEHRA, it's an incredibly important community. Hopefully the work that gets done here can get spread out from beyond the federal sector as well. So just as a touch of background, I know Peter gave you a little bit there, but I'm a rehabilitation physician in the VA. I have spent a bunch of years doing polytrauma and brain injury care, taking care of the most severely combat wounded coming through the VA in our polytrauma sites, and really developed a passion for the appropriate processes that we need to build, as well as the information technology that we can bring forward, both from an interoperability standpoint, which we'll touch on a little bit here today, but much more from a process standpoint. So prior to getting into the software, and I think that's probably what everybody wants to see, I'd like to start in a different place. I think it's always important to start with the why before we get into the what, the how, the who, and the when. So for the why, in front of you, you should see a gentleman. His name is Roy Zimmer. Roy was, passed a few years ago, a World War II vet. Roy was knocked off the deck of his ship, the USS Montpelier, by a kamikaze pilot, suffered a traumatic brain injury from it and a punctured eardrum. Was only saved by a friend of his who was in the water with him from drowning. Not many months later, Roy was asked to go on shore duty and went into Hiroshima 3 days after the bomb was dropped, the big one, obviously, and was there to collect metal and to report back in terms of what he saw. And as you can imagine, associated with that, Roy had some pretty significant PTSD and had some later in life medical problems. Well, Roy, just like most people as they get older, as I mentioned, began to have medical problems. Some of these were cognitive in nature, and Roy found himself the same way we all do when we're sick, in a very vulnerable state, emotionally raw, and having some difficulty tracking what should and should not be happening with his medical care over time. Roy, unlike many of us, was fortunate that he had a daughter. You can see her in the right there. That's Patty. Patty carried around her little red notebook everywhere she went with Roy, and in the notebook she wrote down everything that was supposed to be happening with Roy, all of his medications, all the processes he was supposed to be involved in, was very vigilant to make sure that things got done when they were supposed to get done over time. Obviously, everybody needs a Patty in their life and an advocate for them in healthcare to be able to smooth through all the challenging areas as time goes on, to make sure that we can really focus on healing and not managing our own care. Well, unfortunately, we all don't have a Patty. We all don't have somebody who can really do that for us and help steward us through, the various different appointments, procedures, and everything else that we have done. So really the attempt that we're going to see here today, and a lot of what we're going to see with eHMP here today with activity management, is how can we take that concept of almost an ombudsman for oneself and build that into software to be able to help support the veteran, or God forbid any other patient, as well as the healthcare provider and the administrators, to make sure that these pathways are laid out appropriately for patients as they flow through their care. At the heart of all of this is a concept that is near and dear to my heart, which is one of process interoperability. Process interoperability is the capability for all of the machines, be it on a factory floor, to work together in synchronization to make sure that as something flows down from the front door to the back door of the factory, everything happens appropriately and in time in the way that it's supposed to. In healthcare, we talk about interoperability frequently, and we usually focus on the data itself. Can we get the data back and forth in its raw form? Can we then get data back and forth that has meaning associated with it, these semantic ontologies and understanding? And we've really focused significantly on this and made some great strides over the year across our health system, obviously in the VA, but also in the private sector. But at the end of it, the only real purpose for that data to go back and forth is to make sure that as individuals, as Roy flows through his care, the right things happen over time, that the data, or God forbid the information, even better than data, is in the right place at the right time to help propel somebody forward. So then when we look at, truly this concept of process interoperability in healthcare, it's dependent on teams, and we're, forever trying to form a little bit tighter into teams. But we also have to see that in a very realistic way that if you're not on mute, can you please mute your mic? Thank you. If you're not on mute, will you please mute your mic?
I just did that for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. When we look at healthcare, when we look at the factory floor, we, as healthcare providers, I'm in the Cleveland VA here today, we are the machines that move patients through over time and across. And really the heartbeat of this process interoperability is communication between individuals and knowing who to communicate with, and also the presence of clinical care pathways that we can flow people down. So in that regard, I'm going to introduce eHMP here a little bit. This is the GUI layer, or the clinician-facing electronic health record portion of Vista Evolution. Really three main goals, and you can read them there on your screen in front of you. But the first one is to get people all the information that they need to be able to take care of the patient that's in front of them. Number two is really moving towards a platform level of supporting applications so we can go to market much quicker on many more solutions at a much lower cost in the VA. And then this last piece is which we're going to focus on with activity management here today is how do we take clinical practice guidelines, care paths, all these different things that we develop over time, and how do we make them real? How do we make them live in the health record within the workflow of the clinicians that need to execute these things for the veterans or any other patient, obviously. So we're going to get in really into that third bullet here mostly today. This specific slide here or view is meant to denote what it looks like from an individual patient, and I'm sure that there's somebody out there who's had relatively complex medical issues in their life or different things, and you know what it looks like to you as you flow through. It feels very linear. My problems are my problems, and I expect anymore as a patient, given all of the information technology that exists out there, I expect that my care team communicates with each other, that when I show up to see my primary care doc and then potentially to the orthopedic surgeon and maybe to my physical therapist, that they all know who I am, they all know what my goals are, they know what my pathway through healthcare is. If, say, the physical therapist needs to clarify something with the orthopedic surgeon or vice versa, that I expect people to do that, and I expect that to be happening in the background, right, as a patient. And I was just admitted to the hospital a few weeks back after a cat bite, of all things, and I expected this, and, you know, frankly, I didn't see it necessarily play out that way. It's a different situation. Don't mean to make anybody vertiginous there, but it's a different situation as a healthcare provider. We sit in these little exam rooms, and people come to us really from every direction and flow on to all kinds of other directions. And I've been trying to come up with the best analogy I can, what it feels like to be a healthcare provider with the current information technology systems that we have, and I think this is the best I can do. It feels as if I'm in the depths of a deep, dark cave, and I'm standing down there, and I've got a tiny little pen light with me. This little pen light, I can look back to the cave, and I can see people coming towards me, and these are my patients coming into my clinic, and I can look back where they came from and see some of their data and kind of figure out where they came from. The more time I spend looking in the nooks and crannies, the more I can put it together and understand where they're coming from. And then I obviously speak with them and try to figure out, what the problems are. And then I take my little pen light and I point it down deep into the cave and I say, go that way, right? I write my notes, I write orders. I hope that these things are going to happen. I hope that I've put people on a pathway towards something that can make a meaningful change in their lives. But I know that there are no guardrails on that for them. I know that just because I've practiced long enough, I kind of know where the good people are at, and I know if I point in that direction, Barb is out there. I know I can trust the PTs, or I can trust these other folks, and I never really get any feedback, and it really comes down to Roy or whomever else it is to really carry their story forward with them and try to get it affected over time. And that's really the core, I think, of what the issue we have here in healthcare today is, and what drives our providers up the wall. We just want to help people. We want to quickly figure out what the situation is, figure out what is supposed to be happening, and get people moving in the proper direction over time. And obviously, as patients, we don't want to carry that forward. We're sick, we're tired, we're in pain, we're vulnerable. We want the system to care for us. So, enter in activity management. Activity management is really, to me, the heartbeat of the eHMP product and platform that we're bringing forward. This will give us the capacity to take VA best practices or best practices from anywhere else, be it colon cancer screening, be it the one here in front of you that has more to do with anticoagulation, be it consults that we're putting through, or some other very unique capabilities that we've built into the health record here now, and wrap these things up and deploy these activities and protocols directly into the health record. You'll see a BPMN screenshot here in the lower right-hand corner, and that's what we're building on top of is BPMN 2.0. Specifically in eHMP, we're using the Red Hat product. We're using the standards associated with that and the standards associated with the OASIS Human Task Specification 1.0. To be able to match these clinical protocols and pathways that we develop and design, and then have the capacity to change them relatively rapidly as necessary, deploy them into the healthcare moment for patients, and track them over time, and really kind of form these tubes or these pathways for people to flow down in terms of healthcare. So the question is what is an activity, right? And I think this is really going to be important once you see the software itself. Well, I've used this Gaelic infinity symbol here to denote the activity. And an activity, essentially, could just be about anything that is affected in healthcare, which is in the center here. I've got some clinical decision support and really event-related architecture that is listening to the health record to try to figure out when things are coming back and when criteria are met. I have the capacity to message with other people. There are obviously radiology studies and consultations and task lists and medications and laboratory studies and whatnot. These are all pulled together around a concept. Again, could be a colon cancer screening, could be for let's say for Roy, and speaking about him earlier, perhaps it's a pain thing associated with a trigeminal neuralgia or something associated with PTSD. And these things are wrapped into a clinical protocol and carried forward over time within a patient's care delivery. So I'm almost done with the slides here, and we'll get to the software. With the BPMN installation into the core of eHMP, there were a couple of really key things that needed to get done. First, it was pulling together the BPMN suite itself and modding that to some degree for healthcare. There were some changes that we needed to make. And then the biggest challenge with BPMN over time is trying to figure out who should do what, right? So these activities that exist have lots of tasks. Some are computer-driven tasks and some are human-driven tasks. And how do you map that onto an organization such as ours, which is really, really large, different shifts, different centers of care, people coming in and out of jobs all the time. How do we make sure that the right thing gets done for the right patient in the right time? And then obviously the development of care pathways. It is really these three legs of the stool that activity management is built upon. So what you'll see, and I'm just going to do this very quickly, what you'll see in the software as you come up is this capacity to take something in front of you that is as part of a colorectal screening protocol that's got a lot of bifurcations to it, the orders themselves, trying to capture if something isn't done in time. This was put together by an expert panel in the VA, following the system to see if it's abnormal or normal, and then the need to escalate things over time if they don't happen appropriately. And I will say as an aside, that's the hardest thing to figure out in medicine, is the thing that didn't happen, the thing that you had hoped would happen and didn't happen. Through the BPMN suite, we actually can capture those in-progress things, apply time frames to them, and
yeah. Shane, are you up for a question?
Of course, yeah.
So this is Jack Taylor. I've changed the back of my business card to say it's all about the 15-minute visit. And I just wanted your opinion on how the VA is progressing to a reasonably standardized approach to a clinical condition that's agreed upon by clinicians.
So there are a lot of different ways to skin that onion or cat, Jack. I will take you in my own experience and explain to you how we came about it in one case, and it may not be totally generalizable for the VA, but I think it would be helpful. Would that help you?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Is that
okay.
We can standardize everything we can in systems and data and et cetera, but if we don't have a reasonably complex but now simplified approach to basic clinical conditions that's agreed upon and taught, then we're going to have people running all over the room.
Sure. So absolutely. So people are always the problem. I think we all know this, right? And as a person, I am definitely a problem. I know that. But when it comes down to my own experience here, is I was part of the team that built the TBI clinical practice guidelines for the VA and DoD, and took us about a year to 2 years to really work through all of the relevant literature, to come up with an algorithm like you see here in front of you that is symptom-driven and veteran-driven, and really getting the right resources at the right time to help support people. And it was a beautiful practice guideline. It's a great document. It's about 300 pages long. We built a bunch of PowerPoint presentations and pocket cards, and we actually got to the point where there was agreement on what should be done. The biggest challenge is how do you get people to actually do it, right? Any busy clinician out there, and as you say in the 15-minute appointment, doesn't have time to pull out a pocket card for every condition. God forbid one that actually is relatively complex like TBI, and drive people down all these pathways. So I think we have some capacity, maybe not perfect capacity, but some capacity to come to an agreement around basic conditions on what should happen and when, right? Our capability to communicate that out to the clinical audience and to really drive real change and get people to change their habits, I think is very poor right now across medicine. With what I'm about to show you here, I think we take a great leap forward in standardization of that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So anyhow, talking here quickly, here's this clinical practice guideline that we pulled together, and we then abstracted that into the Red Hat BPMN. So this is a screenshot of the actual model that you saw above. This is an event-related architecture that once it's started on any given patient, will follow where they're at on the pathway, provide taskings and notifications and abilities really kind of to get through and support people on their pathway through healthcare. I'm not going to get too deeply into consults here. We redid the consult package within the VA through eHMP, really trying to nail down these here in front of you, these problems, and these are very real problems in VISTA CPRS right now, at least that we deal with. And again, I'm at the VA here today, and we're studying with the VERC and human factors engineers problems and solutions associated with these. And I'm going to show you in the software how we've attempted to jump over these. I'll just pause here quickly as people can read this. Obviously, with better management and tracking, we need to offload a lot of the workup and improve our communication around these things. This is a screenshot, at least, of the BPMN that we have built around consults. It's a consult metastructure that we can build in a lot of different concepts and things into over time to make sure that we drive this forward. Really, one of the beauties about BPMN is that you can pretty rapidly, if you find something needs to be changed, there's a new guideline that comes out, and it's now Plavix instead of aspirin, or anything along those lines, or it's 14 days instead of 28 days. Unlike having these things hard-coded into a software program, when they are on BPMN, you can change the nodes and shift them quickly and really change the behavior of these without a significant development overhead. So the scalability and the capability to do this is massive in healthcare, as long as you can solve that human communication piece. There's another shot of it there. So at the end of the day, we need to move people from one end of the factory floor in healthcare to the other end of the factory floor. The more time we spend on doing the work that's ahead of us, i.e. planned work, the more efficient we are, the more effective we are in doing what we do. The more time that we spend working on unplanned work, or everything that was supposed to happen that fell apart, the less efficient we are and the less able we are to meet the needs of the people in front of us. If I did not mention it earlier, strongly recommend you read the book The Phoenix Project and see what the power of this potentially could be for healthcare. And again, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that our patients, our veterans, get the care that they need. I will tell you specifically that Roy Zimmer actually did not get his care in the VA. The things that he felt in terms of his disconnections in care and really needing that level of support was at a variety of different institutions and hospitals where he lived. And I don't know how much better it would have been necessarily in the VA, but this isn't a VA problem. This is obviously a healthcare problem. And as we move forward, hopefully with the things that we're doing in the VA and partnering with you wonderful folks in OSEHRA, we can really begin to really bring forward some real solutions. So that being said, I'm going to shift over to the demo itself, probably a little longer than you wanted on that, but hopefully that helps us set the stage there. As I'm doing this, does anybody have any questions?
I'm going to be quiet.
The other thing I was thinking about is, using the BPM, and I can see, very easy, quickly to change the rules and so on. But do you foresee that each individual institution, a VA, will be able to customize their workflow and that business process, or do you expect it all to follow the same so-called best practice?
It's a really wonderful question, right? We anticipate, so there's the customizability both at the level of the flow and what should happen. There's also the customizability in what resources do I have in my facility to affect that, right? I may not have, I may not have a neurosurgeon on staff, or I may not have, this high level of care here. So there's a customizability that's needed for both ends. On the front end, we anticipate that we'll be able to develop these things for lots of different conditions and flows, and come to some agreement across, the executive level of the VA. The way that it's structured right now, that's the only level of flexibility or customizability that we have built into the BPMN suite, we do anticipate that there will be a more local level of customizability of the actual thing itself, but obviously the connection to the human beings and the resources that are there are going to need to change based upon what resources are there regionally. So this is clearly a journey that we are just beginning right now, and there's going to be a lot of I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with that, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Is how do you get something that is both standardized but flexible at the same point? Any other questions as I launch in here? All right.
I'll wait for the end.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So here we are. This is a demo account here today, and as with any other demo account, I'm sure I'm going to have problems with it as we go through. This is eHMP 2.0. We are currently just about done with the first contract that we have to develop the eHMP. This represents a little less than a year and a half of development effort. There is also another product, I think a lot of the folks in OSEHRA have seen it, which is eHMP 1.2. That is coming online with users really here starting tomorrow in the VA. 1.2 itself is just a viewer. 2.0 really gets us into the do space for eHMP. So as you know, it is a website, so it's a single representation of the website across the VA. There may be, as time goes on, some site-by-site capabilities. I'm actually going to jump over this screen first because it really makes best sense at the back end of the demo here. And I'm going to jump into a patient's chart. That specifically is a multi-patient space that really represents the things that need to get done associated with activities and tasks as they move through. Here we are flowing into the health record itself, and I'm going to highlight a couple of things. Take a slight pause on the activity management piece for folks who have not yet seen this product or this demo, and I do it. This is actually. This is not common, but this is the third time today that I've done this. So it's beginning to feel a bit like a ride at Disney, right? But demoing it for executive leadership and a bunch of different folks at the local VA here.
I love that line.
Right. So at your left, you'll see Mickey Mouse. Anyhow, so just to pause here a little bit, I do want to talk about a couple of concepts that I think are really important. The first one is the movement from data and to information, or towards information. And that sounds like a real geeky thing to say and really shouldn't have any impact on what we do as doctors or nurses or social workers. But we have this thing now that we are now truly having true data interoperability. We're starting to have a big data problem in a patient's record. There's a lot of data in there anymore. It's coming from lots of different places. It's coming. Oh. Do we have an echo? We do.
Let me see who it is.
Who is it? McNamee.
Sorry.
I think we're good.
Testing. We're good? Yeah, that sounds better. It's always horrible to hear your own voice, right? So we need to move from, you get into a patient's record anymore, and there's a lot of data right there, and it can be really cognitively overwhelming. There's a lot of things that are hidden, deep, dark, back into a record that are very applicable for the moment that you're at, and we really need support to be able to make decisions quickly. So again, the transition from data to me is, lines on an Excel spreadsheet, and that's, often what you see in a health record, to information. And information is, taking various different points of data, connecting them together in a relational model, really, is something they're related to, and providing visual displays, often rich visual displays, to help people understand what's happening quickly. So again, sounds like a really wonky thing to say, but here's a great example of it. In the upper left-hand part of the screen here, the first thing that you note is this thing with bar charts on here, green and blue and this red line. Well, there's probably some folks out there who remember what it was like to be a clinical provider before electronic health records. And they remember what it was like when you're admitting your patient to the hospital and you're going down and you're picking up the patient's chart. There was a huge amount of wisdom, if only knowledge, that you got from picking up a chart that, you know, was 3 to 4 pages long versus a chart that was, you know, 30 to 40 pounds of paper. They mean very, very different things in terms of the amount of healthcare utilization and what it potentially means for the complexity of what you're about to get yourself into. As we moved into the era of electronic health records, we've really lost that. You know, we generally see just the top level of data that floats up to the top of the screen based upon its criticality or its timing, and we don't have a great understanding of the breadth of the data maybe that we're sitting on. So what this has done here, and this is it's multifunctional. This is a line here that is today, is that red line, and each one of these green bars represents an inpatient day stay, so an encounter for an inpatient day, and each blue bar represents an encounter for an outpatient stay. So we can take those pieces of data that if you had them all in a spreadsheet in front of you, it may not mean much to you, it may take you a little while to figure out what it means. They can provide that as a very rapid orientation to take a look at, this patient that I'm seeing in the ER today has recently been discharged from the hospital. Really important to see. Or, you know, this patient that I'm seeing in the ER today has, you know, really no recent healthcare and health history at all or healthcare utilization that I have access to, and provides us with that information capsule to orient me to, you know, potentially how sick the patient is. We've also used it here within the health record itself, and there's a lot of dummy data in here. Obviously, hopefully somebody hasn't been in the hospital for 20+ years, but we've used it to reorder the data. So we've broken everything down into the domains across our health records. So we've lined everything up here as a timeline. This is actually an end user from the initial eHMP project, which was a wonderful project in the VA. One of the eHMP users recommended this, and they initially built that, and you know, allows us to see kind of historically what's happened. It also allows me in the health record to now just change all of the information that's in any of these displays without having to do that in any given.
Yeah. So I'm gonna interrupt you again very briefly, just to the screen that's on the slide. My understanding is that in eHMP 2.0, what is there is individually selectable by the provider, so that if he doesn't want to see documents on imaging, he doesn't have to. If he doesn't have to see active and recent medications, well, maybe he should. And he doesn't need to see narrative lab results, so that's individually selectable within the project. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So I'm going to show you the workspace builder here. There's a lot of different information needs that people have, and they want to see things in different ways, and they want to be able to control what's in front of them. So we worked to build exactly what you see in front of you. Every user will have the capacity to do this. We have about 20+ apps that we're deploying eHMP 2.0 with. We anticipate this to grow into an actual app store as time goes in, or time goes on rather, to be able to you know, really kind of develop out lots of different apps for lots of different things. But for this one here, we'll build a quick one. Do you have a common clinical scenario that you'd like to talk about or have been a part of?
The common clinical scenario is a 68-year-old with PTSD, hypertension, and diabetes.
Okay, great. So very helpful. So I'm gonna throw a couple of things on here and show you how you potentially could take eHMP 2.0 and either we would structure this out from a national perspective and deploy these worksheets, or you could just go ahead and build your own. So why don't we just do this for now? There's probably other things on here I'm missing, but I don't want narrative labs. I want numerical labs. So let me pull this over here quickly.
And I apologize, Shane, for interrupting.
No, I think this is great. No problem at all. I'd much rather have people interested in what I'm doing than falling asleep on the other end. So it's nice to know you're awake. So I'm going to go ahead, and I just built this. I've called it HIMSS because I was on there earlier, but I could change the name of this. I should have called it OSEHRA. I was at HIMSS yesterday, and I was working on that sheet. So anytime I now log into this application from anywhere on any patient, this workspace will exist in the way that I set it up. From a, you mentioned from a documents perspective, I only want us to see specific things. We'll make this relatively easy. A lot of times, what people want to see is what they did last. So let's assume that my name here, just is all dummy data. My name is 6Provider. Okay, we're going to change Shane's name to 6Provider here. So what I would do is I would go ahead and I would set a filter on here that picks up the data there, and it's also a bunch of other metadata it can pick up against. And you can see here I've got a filter set up. I can put as many on there as I want to, but then when I go back to this page in this space, anytime that I got onto this specific workspace that I've built, all I'm going to see is things in here that say 6, right? And let's say we wanted to get a little bit more specific, and I just wanted to see, consults that I've completed or somebody else has completed associated with that. I can go ahead and put that on there and close this down. Oh, you know what? This is an and. It's not an or at this point, so it didn't pull off the rest of it. But you get that.
I get the idea. I get the idea because the idea is the 15-minute visit.
Yes, sir.
It all comes back to that. And when you're reviewing the cases that you're going to see tomorrow in your clinic, before the day starts, you'd like to come to your own format of, okay, what's been going on with this, with patient Dan 3? Who's he been consulted to? What lab results does he have, et cetera, et cetera? And this is what has not been presented by eHMP until today.
Huh. I didn't know that. Well, here we are. We spent a lot of work on this. It's, as you note, I've got 15 minutes. I need to be able to get to the information that I need quickly to make good decisions. I should be spending a lot more time making eye contact with my patients and talking to them rather than digging through the record. So really the question is how do you design software that allows the flexibility like we're seeing here in front of you? So I can put, all of these different things and graph these different things and add these, so I can structure them out against each other and see, over time the change in pulse and blood pressure. And would be a medication graph on here, but he didn't have any metoprolol. So I could see the changes over time. And have the information that I need to make the decisions very quickly, rather than picking through all the different blood pressures and the metoprolol doses and trying to figure all these different things out. So this level of customizability, we built some early versions of in the Joint Legacy Viewer, which I've had the opportunity to work on for a few years now, and really taken it the next step with different types of applets, a lot more flexibility in terms of how you can display them, but also starting to build in all these different filter sets as well, so you can get what you need to get. So, sir, is that what you wanted to see?
Right. Yeah, because the JLD is what I worked on with Jonathan Nebeker, and it was always focused on saying what does the doc need to the visit, and how do we incorporate the data from the patient, which we're doing, and how do we have that improve health, not healthcare, but health. And this looks to be on that path.
I'm happy to hear you say that. We've had, from a clinical provider standpoint, and Jonathan obviously is really the visionary of this project, but there's been a handful of us, Christian Johnson and Jessica Murphy and a bunch of other clinicians, Tony Currens, who've really put a huge amount of effort into this project, and were listened to by our technical counterparts, and really bought into truly developing a system that can help people deliver, health care and healthy options a lot more rapidly and effectively. So there's a lot of pride here.
Yeah, but partially, what's on the screen right now is something that a clinician, before a visit, and say, okay, I can whistle through this, I can click on what I want to click on, and I'm ready to see the patient in the next 10 minutes. That's the whole idea of 2.0.
Yes, sir. It's a huge piece of it. It's a huge piece of it. I'll show you something else here that you might find interesting. And this is something we've all dreamed about for a lot of years, but haven't quite gotten there, which is the capacity to go ahead and search a record. So there are oftentimes something that hang out in the background that you need to find, and it's very difficult to find. I was doing a consult here at the VA a couple of weeks back, and I was gonna put a needle into a gentleman's shoulder. I was gonna inject him for some pain relief, and I was pretty concerned that he might have HIV, just given his history. And I asked him, and he said, "No, I've been tested here, and I'm HIV negative." And I pulled up CPRS, and I couldn't find anything in there, so I launched the eHMP, our production version, and I searched for it. And in this case, it's not going to work because there's nothing there, so I'll put something else in. I'll put diabetes in. And I searched for it, and about 10 seconds later, I found out that no, there was no mention of this anywhere in the gentleman's record at any time by anybody. It's a pretty remarkable moment for me. And I know we've put, and this is another piece of the product, the search came from the original HMP crew, but this capacity to get down to the thing that you want to see very quickly, to be able to help build that patient story and what you're going to do. If I were to do that and I were to spend time looking through all of the patients' VA medical records and all of their DOD medical records to try to figure out whether or not they had an HIV test, I would never go home because I don't have,
correct.
I don't have enough time to do that. And now, with the search functionality here, we have the ability to really drill down very quickly into the, at this point, the data that we need to be able to help make decisions. So
yeah, and we've got about 11 minutes left, so I'm going to leave one final comment.
Yes, sir.
Is that there appears to be a potential tool to improve health, to improve health care, that doesn't matter what the VA decides to do with a commercial COTS product or anything else, because this works. And this is the best presentation I've seen on eHMP. And Peter will tell you, I've been around this for 4 years.
Well, I appreciate those comments, sir. I've had a lot of practice today alone giving it. But I've also, for the last 2 years, have bled this. So,
Shane,
yes,
this is Nancy Anthracite.
Hey, Nancy.
One of the methods using CPRS that you can use to rapidly search a chart is the graphing. I'm wondering if that capability is looking to be brought into eHMP.
I showed you the stack graphs earlier. There is a graphing capability in eHMP. I just came off of that. I do want to show you one other thing. So,
but is it
yes,
comparable to the one that's in CPRS?
I would say that they're different, to be honest with you. CPRS has been developed on for obviously a lot of years. I think it's probably a deeper graphing thing, but I do believe that there are some significant improvements in the graphing capabilities in eHMP. I'd be happy to talk to you about those and show you those side by side, and we could pick them apart at some point. But I think that I think there are benefits to both. I'm a huge CPRS.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about, for instance, HIV thing, it lists all the lab tests that were ever done, so that you could look and see if an HIV test had been done and then find the result quickly. It's just
Nancy,
yeah.
only at my facility. It wouldn't show. Right, it wouldn't show the one up the street. It wouldn't show me the information from the DOD. It is a client-server-based application, and I can only get the information that's there. So you're right. It is, and I think it's wonderful stuff. You know, it's.
Well, I'm just kind of interested in seeing if that particular thing about graphing can be put into here. That's all.
I think we can build just about anything we want in here, to be honest with you, because again, as a platform level, deploying in here is easy. I do want to shift. I have the last couple minutes, and I promised some folks that I would show them some of the activity management pieces in here, and I really want to show you these two things really quickly. This, to me, to begin with, here's the functionality associated with it. We believe that one ought to be able to do the things that one needs to do in the health record at the same time of looking at the health record itself. Shocking concept, right? And I know that a lot of our providers in the VA have wanted this for a long time. That's the functionality that you see here. But this is an activity, and I'm probably not going to get into the consults here too deeply, that harkens back to the activity management stuff I started early on. And again, one of the biggest problems I have here in healthcare today is I don't know who to contact for a patient if I need to talk to somebody. Asynchronous communication through the medical chart is nearly worthless because we're all moving in a bunch of different directions, and I don't know how to get things followed up over time, either with myself or somebody else. So this activity, which has an activity diagram and whatnot behind it, gives us the capacity for the first time that I've ever seen within the electronic record to asynchronously communicate and ask a question to any other medical provider about a patient and have it followed up on over time. And I'm going to show you how this flows into the tasks and activities. But this one, let's say this was for this patient, and I had searched earlier, and this guy did not have an HIV test done. So I would HIV test requested. I could send this to. Show you how this works. My mouse is jumping around there. HIV test requested. I'll put a little bit more information here about it. I could either send it to myself in the future, right, as a sticky note to remind myself to do this and get rid of the pocket cards that I have that I'm constantly writing to follow up on patients. I could send this to another person who's an eHMP user anywhere within the VA network. This isn't just my own VA. This is at any facility. But even more powerfully here, I can send this question to anybody who's on a healthcare team that I belong to. These teams are determined through our PCMM tool currently in the data set there, or any team that a patient, that this specific patient belongs to. I know that this guy's got no data in his patient team, so I'm going to go back to my teams, and I'm going to pick, say physical therapy and, any specific role in here, and then anybody who lives in this role will get this activity to come their way. Just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to send it to myself. I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to show you how this works. This is how all of the activities work. They are task-driven. They are delivered to the appropriate people at the appropriate time. So we're going to head back out to the staff view here, and you're going to see quickly here for the patient that I just came off of, which was patient Dan, in the activities over here. You see the HIV test requested. This is the request. The specific task is right here, and let's say I was the, this was to self just because I'm on the same user, but let's say I was the primary care doc and I was in that role and I sent it to that person. When they logged on, they would see this, or say it was to the case manager and there was a question with some follow-up things that would go to the case manager, and a lot of work done on the user interface here in terms of how these things are related to different people, but very simply, in a few clicks of the button, I can say, okay, this is the guy, I see that task, it'll take me back into the gentleman's record, I get all the information here in front of me that I can affect this in any way that I want to, my task comes out, and I have lots of different options with it. I can complete it, I can send it back, I can say, no, let's shut this thing down, I can forward it on to somebody else. But from a very rapid perspective, I can ask a question to another healthcare provider asynchronously and get the information back very quickly, have it part of the record you know, unlike we have right now where, you know, as a doctor, somebody comes to see me and I have a question for the primary care doc, and I write that question in my note, and it takes them 4 weeks to get back to see the primary care doc, and they see the primary care doc and they write something in their note, and I see that thing come back, and you know, it's 12 weeks later and we've finally agreed to give the patient ibuprofen or an MRI or these different things. That could have been effected in 11 seconds in the health record. So
yeah, but also to the previous screen, Shane,
yes, sir.
It appears that you could set the urgency from routine to urgent.
Yep.
Correct?
Absolutely.
So that anybody that has the 5 rights of that patient is going to be capable and responsible to respond. Correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And to move people through healthcare quicker, right? So, again, at the end of this, right, I talked about that little pen light, right, that sitting deep dark in the cave. With the eHMP, our hope is that now somebody's turned the lights on in the cave, right? We now have the information, not just the data, but the information rapidly at our fingertips that we need to figure out where somebody's coming from. And then, instead of pointing that little pen light off into the future, I have these activities that are generated and can be started. There are these different railroad tracks with guardrails that we keep people on the pathway that they need to be on to change these pathways over time that we need to make sure that Dan or Roy or whomever it is by the end of their life, that when they come into healthcare, people know what's happened with them, where they're supposed to be going, and can really help people very quickly without struggling against the system to do that. So
yeah, we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to usurp Peter Lee's responsibility as the actual co-chair of the architecture work group to say, number 1, remarkable presentation. Number 2, it's been recorded. Number 3, great slides. This is, in my last 2.5 years with the eHMP, the best presentation I've seen. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Are there any questions I could answer for anybody as we go off? I'm obviously happy to do that over email as well, and I think you should all have my email. But anything last we can do here? Well, to the OSEHRA community, what you do is incredibly important. Thank you for helping shape so much of what we do, and I can tell you from the VA, the partnership with OSEHRA is dearly held, and we hope to continue to improve upon it over the years. So have a lovely day, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking a break from this busy schedule that you have. Wonderful presentation.